So first of all, you are on the Seeds for Growth webinar. If you think you're meant to be somewhere else, this is your warning that this is a Seeds for Growth webinar. Um, and on the call today, we have David Williams, who is the grants manager, and we have wonderful Lynn Hood, who keeps us all running, and we have Catherine Skinner. So we have various people who might pop up and answer your questions as the day goes on, or evening goes on, I should say. My name is Hannah Sanderson, and I'm the Programme and Innovation Manager for Church of Scotland, and have been kicking about now for about 8 years. Moved over to Seeds for Growth in March, so I'm a relative newbie. So if you hear David Williams piping up, it's because he wants to add something to what I've said. So we're going to have quite an informal time of that if you hear either Catherine or Lynn or David adding to the evening. How is this going to work? Now, what this session is about how to fill in the forms. But a lot of you will have heard nothing so far about Seeds for Growth. And so we're going to do a little bit of an intro, looking at anything that's overarching that runs across all of the levels of grant. That should probably take about 20 minutes, and then we'll answer some questions that come from that presentation. Questions you put into the Q&A box. Now, those of you that are au fait with Zoom, you'll know that along the bottom there's a toolbar, and you should have Q&A in a box, and that's what you click to write your questions into. If that's not appearing, then click the three little dots that say more underneath it, and then the Q&A should be there. In the Q&A, if it's something that David can answer immediately, he might just answer it right there and then in the box, or he might say, oh, that's coming up in a minute or two. But we will stop at least 4 questions to be answered from the box. But that's how we're going to do it, rather than people speaking, because there's just so many of us. So the Q&A box on your toolbar at the base of your screen. So we're going to work through the intro, time of questions, then we're going to work through level 1 form, time of questions and a short comfort break. Then we're going to go through the level 2 form, which is a bit bigger, and then the initial proposal form for levels 3 and 4. I apologize now that it's probably going to be quite a long night because we want to give you more information than less. But this is being recorded, so please be aware that this is being recorded. If you'd like to turn off your camera because you don't want that, then this is your time. And so you might have to duck out, in which case we will then put this recording or recordings like it on our website. So that's something if you can't remain for the whole evening. As you can imagine, there are similarities as we go through the levels of form. So we will be, saying as said when we did level 1, or as said when we did level 2. So you might have to watch the whole thing. Sorry about that. Level 3 is a 2-stage process. We're going to take you up tonight to the initial proposal form, because that's what you do. You write an initial proposal form, and then we get in touch with you and tell you how to take it further from there. So tonight, intro, level 1, level 2, and up to the initial proposal form. Hopefully you received the email on Monday from lovely Lynn with all of the paperwork in it. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that or not, but what I'm going to be saying this evening is not going to be vastly different from the guidelines that you were sent. It's not going to be hugely more than what has been sent you, but just sometimes it's easier to listen to information than it is to read information. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. If you're the kind of person that's massively switched on and you've read all those guidelines, then you might not get too much more from this evening. But hopefully most of you will get something more. For the first little bit, the intro, I'm going to be sharing some slides, and we will email out those slides to you. So you don't need to scribble down notes for that. And we will be using the email addresses that you emailed Lynn with earlier. So if that's not right, again, get in contact with us and say, actually, this is my email address. So you're muted, and we'd like you to remain muted. As I say, we're going to use the question and answer box for questions and interactions. I think that's all the procedural stuff. The exits are here, 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 and here, and I will not be distributing peanuts as we go through the evening. Okay, so let's start with a small PowerPoint presentation, which just gives you an overview of everything.
One quick thing before that, Hannah, little
Yep.
poll for
Oh,
people.
yes, I knew I'd forget that. We're just going to do a quick poll. So this should have come up on your screen. And it's just to give us a little bit of knowledge about whether or not you're just here to gather general information, or whether or not you actually, you've got a project in the pipeline, and also gives us an understanding of whether loads of people are going to do level 1 or loads of people are going to do level 3. And I'm aware that some of you don't know that information yet because you've not heard the presentation. But if you could fill that in for us, that would be great. I'm going to close mine down because I'm not going to do it. Thanks, David, for popping that up. I did write it in very colourful letters on the bottom of my piece of paper, but then completely forgot to say it. So,
No problem.
okay, so I'm going to hopefully share my screen. And you can give me a nod, David, that you can see that. That would be great. Yep, brilliant. Yep. Okay, so Seeds for Growth. Just there's some people's names there at the bottom, just in case you're interested. Neil Glover is our convener. And then the other people I have mentioned already. So money, let's talk about money. So in 2023, we allocated nearly £700,000, and we want to allocate this year up to 1.3 million. So the first thing we really want to say is we want to give you the money. There's no tricks, there's no traps. We're a friendly bunch, and we're going to tell you exactly how to get it this evening. Our regulations, sometimes we use the word criteria. Every fund, every funder has a criteria. They will fund a certain set of things, and this is what we will fund: to support the numerical and spiritual growth of the Church of Scotland through developing mission through new worshipping communities, developing and nurturing faith in those under the age of 40, and foster discipleship and revitalization within established congregations with the aim of growing the existing congregation or developing a new worshipping community. So those of you that pay attention to things like the General Assembly, you will know that that third bullet point was added to our remit or our criteria at the General Assembly from a swell of the people, saying that that's something that they would also like us to cover. So we are an adaptive group of people. We do listen, and that has been added to our remit. So why new worshipping communities? What do we mean by new worshipping communities? Well, in general, you might have heard of something called the pioneer spectrum that we're going to look at a little bit later on in today's call. But we basically are talking about a replicate or a plant. So that's taking a revitalized model of church and trying it in a new place. A little bit further along the pioneer spectrum is adapt. So pioneers, that's me, you, anybody who's trying anything new, you're a pioneer. We modify ideas for our local context. So not a replication, but an adaptation. And then later on into the pioneer spectrum, we look at pushing the boundaries of what church is and seeking to find new ways to connect with people and to do church. So these are the kinds of things that we use as under the title of new worshipping community. Sometimes they're called fresh expressions, or they might be called pioneering, these kinds of things. But this is what we're interested in. So why new worshipping communities, you might say? Well, research shows us that for large sections of the population, new worshipping communities provide the most effective means of sharing faith. And again, we want to be really open and very, very clear that Seeds for Growth is about mission. We want to reach new people. We want to reach unchurched people. I'm sure that you're aware that our most recent Scottish census tells us that 51% of Scottish people mark themselves as not religious or of no faith. They are the people that we want to be reaching, and small, contextually relevant communities reach people more successfully. That's why we're interested in new worshipping communities. We're also interested in working with young people. So it might be about enabling young people to grow in faith. It could be spaces where they're with their peers, or intergenerational spaces where we all learn from each other. We also want to make sure that we understand that certain, especially working with young people, you're building relationship, you're building trust. So some of the things that we're going to fund are not necessarily overt explorations of faith, because sometimes it's got to start with a youth club, it's got to start with a drop-in, it's got to start with a tea and toast before we get to a place which could develop in the future into a new worshipping community. We're aware that not everything's there right away, but that's our direction of travel. That's our intention. And we need to know that that's your intention as well. So I say intergenerational spaces. And we may support forming a new worshipping community aimed at young people, and young people must have a significant part to play in the leadership and the participation of that. We all know that we all want agency, accountability to make a difference in the communities we take part in, and that's the same for young people. So that's something we'd be looking for. What can and can't be funded? So training, salaries, equipment, space, anything really that's essential to the aims of your project, as long as you can show us that it's part of your project, but not church repairs, retrospective costs, so money you've already spent, and we're not going to be topping up any shortfall in existing congregational income. But there are other places you can get that money to do that. So we've got the Small Grants Fund, which is grants of up to £1,000. The Benefact Trust is a great funder for doing things that have community impact, but not necessarily spiritual formation. We've got the National Churches Trust, which is about buildings and capital grants. And we've also got a list compiled by a wonderful community developer called Mr. Dan Rouse of over 60 funders that you might be able to apply for in your local area. So again, if you want that, then email us at grants@churchofscotland.org.uk and we'll send that list of 60 funders out to you. Funding posts. So not really going to be an issue at level 1, but towards level 2 and above, please note that any role supported by Seeds for Growth funding needs to be a local contract. What do we mean by that? An MDS contract cannot be topped up by a Seeds for Growth project. Of course, an MDS worker could be, for example, your youth worker for 10 hours on a Seeds for Growth project. But that would be a standalone local contract for 10 hours. It wouldn't be part of their MDS contract. And obviously, any form of recruitment needs to go through the proper channels. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be fair. It needs to be openly advertised. Or you need to tell us how the person that's recumbent, who's already in post, fits the role. Projects, not posts. You will see this as a key theme running through our evening. We are here to fund the work. And we are here. Why are we funding the work? We're here to fund the work because of a change we want to see. And that change is bringing people closer in relationship to Jesus. So we're not there just to fund a post. If you just write to us and say, we want a youth worker, that's not going to be a full application. We need to know what the work is, what you're trying to achieve. Now, having a youth worker might be part of your project, and therefore that's fine. Put it there in the list of expenditure and we will fund it. But it's not the aim within itself. It's the work and it's the change that we want to see in community. Who can apply? So you can apply as an individual church, you can apply as a group of churches, you can apply as a presbytery, you can apply as a group of presbyteries. You can also ecumenical work, absolutely. We're all for that. Work that fits in with secular organisations or comes alongside other projects, that's fine too. We just need to make sure that Church of Scotland is there in the mix, and the Church of Scotland is going to be the people that we talk with and our main contact and things like that. All applications need presbytery approval. obviously we need to know that what you're doing is not going to be a surprise to the leadership. Oh, I didn't know this was happening. We can't have that kind of situation. And obviously any form of project or experiment or idea that you're doing, you're going to want to be supported by your colleagues and friends. So level 1 and 2, we are asking you to obtain support before sending the application. So that's could just be a note of a written an email or something like that from your mission officer or from your mission director or from presbytery committee of some kind, just saying, yes, we approve of this, we know about this. That's fine. Level 3 and 4, we're going to also be liaising with the presbytery, because obviously once we get up to level 3 and 4, it's a really chunky piece of work. It's a really big project, and we need to make sure that the support is there for you. And we're going to as we go through the form, you'll see that we also need an extract from your Kirk session minute or your presbytery minute, but we'll cover that in more detail later on. Okay, so let's get into the grants themselves. Level 1, you can apply at any time for level 1. Application forms are just sent in to grants@churchofscotland.org.uk. We aim to turn that around within 2 weeks, and the maximum award is £1,000. So what kinds of things are we thinking we're going to be seeing at a level 1? So it could be an experiment or to test a small scale project. It could be to lay the foundations for a larger project, for example, to do a piece of research into the community or to distribute questionnaires, to bring together a group of stakeholders, start a conversation going. It could be to run a one-off event, and it could be for small pots to do with training. So making sure that the people that you want to work with going forward are trained up for what your need is. Level 2, again, no set closing date, application forms, same address. We aim to provide the decision within 6 weeks, and the maximum award is £10,000. So level 2 grants enable you to test out the viability of ideas. So maybe you've gathered some information from level 1 and you're now thinking, oh, could we have a pilot? Could we see if this has got legs? Let's have a go at starting something off. It could be that whatever it is you're requesting funding for only has a limited time frame of 6 to 12 months, in which case this would be the right fund for you. It allows you to do the thing and then monitor your progress and come up with an evaluative piece. Well, did that work? Was that right for us? How do we feel about that? Did we achieve what we wanted to achieve? There will be some projects that by their nature work well year to year funding, in which case an annual fund like this is going to work for you. And it might be that you're just not quite there yet to know that this project is right for your community. You're not in the long term space, in which case a level 2 grant would be right for you. Level 3, so these are for core funding of projects that have done some research and tested out their ideas. It's up to £40,000 a year for 3 years, and then with the possibility of an extension for an additional 2 years. As I've already said, it's a 2-stage process. First of all, it's an initial proposal form that can be sent to us at any time of the year, and then the stage 2 is the full application form, which we're not going to cover this evening, but we will have a film on the website of going through the full level 3. Now, when you get to the actual full application, there is a deadline there. The next time we'll be considering applications is the 2nd of October. And we would always say that leave at least 4 weeks between the initial proposal form and getting the main chunky application form into us. Not because it's going to take you 4 weeks to fill in, but you might find actually there's some information you need to get from other places. You might want conversations with partners. You might want conversations with other people who are interested. And so we would suggest that you're not doing an initial proposal form, end of September. We'd like to be seeing that in July, if at all possible, or earlier. So level 4 grants are awarded for core funding of projects. And by this point, they're well known to us. They're tested out. You've probably walked the pathway that is levels 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're looking at up to £100,000 a year for 3 years, again, with the possibility of a 2-year extension. Again, this is the process here is initial proposal form. And then we're probably going to want to have a chat with you. We'll get you in touch with one of the committee members to have a good chat through. You're probably not going to be a surprise to us. We probably know you already by this point. And then you're going to do the full application form, which again, the 2nd of October is the deadline. So Seeds for Growth, we have 7 years to allocate the funding. And then, of course, after that, might be paying the funding right through for at least another up to 10 years. But we've only got 7 years to allocate the funding. So if you're thinking, let's walk this pathway of level 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see that actually we could be funding you for quite some time. Some key themes that are running across all of our levels, sustainability. So we want to fund things, but we want to fund things that are still going to be going in 10 years' time. We don't want to be in a situation where we've funded a whole lot of orphans, that the moment the funding from Seeds for Growth stops, the project just dies. That's not what we want. We want to make sure that you have built in a way to be able to sustain what you're doing. And there's lots of ways to be able to do that. But we would be looking for sustainability to be part of what you're thinking about. Obviously, level 1, not so much. Level 2, maybe if you're on the pathway from 1, 2, 3, 4. But by the time we get to level 3, we've got some really crunchy questions about what is your sustainability going to look like once our funding stops. Now, that could be that you could be supported by a congregation, a kind of mother church, so to speak. It could be that you're supported by a cluster and you all get together, all the congregations, and say, we want to plant something in the local new housing estate. It could be that you're taking in something from the people who interact with your project, so a donation, £5 to come to youth club or whatever. Some people obviously could call that tithing, and that's a very traditional model of income generation for church. It could be that you're getting funds and grants from other places, working with the council, working with other charities. It could be that businesses in the local area want to support you. And we'd also be really keen to talk to you about other forms of income generation, which we're just working through now that are kind of new to us here in the Church of Scotland. So could we be looking at, some form of entrepreneurial? Is there something your project could sell? Is there something that we could, in some other way that we could get money in? And of course, we all know of Paul's model of being a tent maker. So perhaps the leadership are going to be bivocational. They're going to be leading this project and they're also going to be doing some other form of paid work. They're just some of the ideas around sustainability. It's important to us as we go forward that we build our community. So we're going to bring together people that we fund to be able to share what they've learned and to be able to learn from each other. Support is available. I'm in post, David's in post, and Lynn and other people, all our committee members are there to be able to help you, talk you through things. We don't review draft applications, but we can have conversations with you. Perhaps we might notice something in your paperwork that we think perhaps needs to have a bit more of a chat around or a bit more thinking, and we can pair you up with somebody to do that. Okay, so that is the overarching things that are important for Seeds for Growth. And as I say, I'm going to talk more. We're going to do level 1, we're going to do level 2, we're going to do level 3. But David, have you got anything in the chat box at the moment that is a question that would fit into this particular slot?
So just to say, we've had 4 questions so far that I have written answers to, but we'll just pop through them so you hear them as well. So will you cover how to go about a feasibility study? No, we won't on this call, but if you want to email us at grants@churchofscotland.org.uk, we can email you back with some information about that. So it's not part of tonight's presentation. Margaret's asked about how do you find the names of your mission officers? I just say contact your presbytery. Not every presbytery has one, most do. And where they don't have one, they will put you in contact either with probably the business committee or the mission committee convener or some other appropriate member of staff. So always go through your presbytery asking who's the appropriate person to support an application to Seeds of Growth. Jean, you asked about can there be security of annual funding for an ongoing project? So if a project has been going for up to 5 years, we're prepared to consider funding that. But what we are asking is that projects should be self-sustainable after the end of that funding. So if you're running a project that really will never become self-sustaining, then we're unlikely to fund it. But if it's something which has got potential but just hasn't quite managed to kick off yet, and a bit more funding would help to get that going, then yes, that would be fine. And then Dan Rouse has asked, are you expecting projects to walk through all 4 stages, or could they jump in stages 2 or 3 potentially? So you don't have to do the precursor levels. You can jump in at any level as long as you've done the groundwork for that. That's fine. That's the questions we've had so far.
Great questions. And yes, just to go back to that last question as well, we're also happy for people to duplicate levels. So for example, you might get a level 1, try something, learn, oh, actually, this is not working. This is not for us. This is not right. Go back to the drawing board, use that information that you've learned, and go again. So you might not find that you walk through it in a sequence. You might end up going 1, 2, 1, 2, and then you found your feet, and then you go 3, 4, and as David says, or perhaps you might jump in at 3 or 4, but we would be needing to see in your application form that you have done the research and also the learning that we would need to see. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance perhaps to look at the guidance notes and the application forms that were sent in the email. I'm going to be working through them. So if you are one of those lucky people that's got 2 screens, woohoo, then you could always have it up on a screen if you would find that helpful. So I'm going to be referencing both the application form and the guidance notes as I go. We've already touched on this, but Seeds for Growth is designed as a pathway. It's a pathway you can jump around in, but if you wanted to, we're here to walk you through from 1 to 4. So 1 is, I don't really know what we're doing. I'm trying to find out what's right for our people. I'm trying to find out what's right for our community. How can we find out these things together? Stage 2 is, I've got an idea. Let's see if we can test it out, and then let's learn. Let's look again, let's evaluate, and then up to stage 3 when you've got a project that you feel is appropriate, and then stage 4 when it's something that's really getting embedded in. So we're trying to be an iterative process. So what does that mean? Try something. If it doesn't work, try it again. Learn as you go. We're also trying to be adapting, therefore, in a relatively quick manner. You'll see there that level 1 is turned around within a couple of weeks, and level 2 is turned around, within a couple of months. So if you've got an idea, we want to be able to move with it quickly. I think we sometimes get stuck in a process of sitting behind closed doors, making a perfect plan, and then the opportunity has passed us by. So you'll also see as we go through this that level 1, it's only £1,000. The form therefore is quite light. As we go up through the levels, we are expecting more information from you. We're expecting you to have thought about it more. And so therefore the application forms and the guidance notes get chunkier as we go up through the levels. I'll be describing to you perfect applications, but please, levels 1 and 2 in particular, it's really quite light touch. So don't be worrying about it. Don't feel overburdened by what you're hearing this evening. We want to give the money away. Just an overarching thing about applying for funding. Every funder has its own language, and you'll find this if you've been applying for funding elsewhere, that funders have what they like. Funders have what they're interested in, what their key priorities are, and you need to find that out so that when you're filling in your application form, you're leaning in a direction that they want you to lean in. I'm going to tell you what we want to hear, so that's very easy. But if you were going to go for any other funders, then read their websites, read their annual reports, find out as much information as you can, look at what they've previously funded. That's going to help you write a successful application. Again, this is very simple, but just in case there's people on here that have never applied for funding ever before, this is what we would suggest. Read through the guideline document, read through the application form before you start writing anything, and then read through the guideline document again. Then you fill in the form, and then you write, you leave it for a wee while, leave it for a few hours, leave it overnight, leave it for a couple of days, and come back to it and read it again, and make any changes that you need to make. Then I would suggest that you have somebody you can pass it to, hopefully a disinterested person is the best kind of person, who's just going to pick up on spelling mistakes or the fact that you haven't totaled the column or these kinds of things, or is able to say to you, I don't really understand what you're saying here. That's a really helpful person to read through the form. And then it's also really helpful to have somebody who does know what they're talking about, somebody who's perhaps also interested in the project, to be able to read through the form as well. So they can actually share their perspective and say, oh, well, I would have said it like this. They're just kind of, that's just a good process for applications, I would say. Okay, so let's get on with it. I'm going to pick up the guideline document here for level 1. And there's an introduction there, which I'm not going to go through, but it just tells us what we've just already heard. Level 1, we're looking to experiment, to test small scale projects, lay foundations for larger projects, run events, hire or purchase equipment, develop skills and knowledge, i.e. small pieces of funding. We've talked about who can apply. We've talked about how much for, up to £1,000 for a period of a year. So you need to spend it within a year. And then we've got our criteria that we talked about earlier: developing mission through new worshipping communities, developing and nurturing faith in the under 40s, fostering discipleship and revitalization within established congregations. And then if you have had a look at the guidelines, you'll see that underneath there, it then says applications for the following will be prioritized. So this is the second lens of priority: developing mission through new worshipping communities and church planting. That's what we're interested in. That's where we want to end up. You might not be there at level 1, you might not be there at level 2, but that's the direction of travel. And engaging in intergenerational approaches too, and participation in worship. So they're not criteria, but it is a prioritization lens that we might use. When might we use that? If we were overburdened with applications, more than we could fund, then that prioritization lens would start to kick in. Can we apply for and hold more than one grant? Yes, you can, as long as you demonstrate that you can handle it. You know, you've got the capability, you've got the team. If you can handle more than one grant and you can show us that you can, then yes, you can have more than one grant. Can we apply if we hold a grant from Small Grants Fund or Pioneer Mission Fund? Yes, you can. Again, you just have to prove to us that you've got the stuff to be able to handle, to spend the projects for all those. What can and cannot be funded? We've covered that. No church repairs, no retrospective costs, and no making up a shortfall. Match funding. For those of you that have been in the arena of funding before, what is match funding? Match funding is when a funder says, I will give you £1,000 as long as you also have another funder who is also willing to give you £1,000. We don't ask for that. We're quite happy in that sense to be your only official funder, because we are aware of the fact that it's quite hard to get funding, particularly for spiritual formation and for religious practices. So you don't need to be match funded with us at all. And that's the same for all 4 levels of funding. And we've talked about how do we apply, you know, how to do that. And we've talked about what support there is available. So I'm now going to switch over to the actual application form. That was the guidance notes. So the actual application form, very light for those of you that have managed to open it. First of all, please tell us how you heard about Seeds for Growth. That's just so that we can get our marketing right. There's 80 of you on the call, so our marketing is obviously working okay so far. Question 2, what is the name of the congregation or presbytery that will carry out the project? Question 3, if the project is to be run by a congregation, which presbytery are you part of? And then we're looking for an address there of whoever the main organization contact will be. So if you're in a cluster or in a group, you have to figure out which address you want to put down. What is the name of your project? We don't mind if the project name is really boring. Don't worry about that. And then we need two contacts, a primary contact and a secondary contact. So their name, how to get in contact with the email, etc. A little note there. It's not so much important at level 1, but it will be going forward. We can't have related contacts. So what do we mean by that? They can't be related to each other, married, living in the same house, or related. And they also can't be related to anybody who might be employed by this project. So that's just a little point there about our contact. And then we've got, please tell us about the work you would like us to fund. 300 words, so not very much, a chunky paragraph. That's all we're looking for there. Question 8, how many months will you use the grant? Maximum of 12 months. But if you know exactly, well, we're only going to do it for 3 months because the event we're doing is in 3 months' time, then that's fine. Just let us know. Question 9, if you are conducting regulated work with children, young people, or vulnerable adults, how will you be adhering to the Church of Scotland's safeguarding policies? So we need to know that you know about them, and we need to know how you will be adhering to them. Question 10, you'll find this question across all of the application forms. Which of the criteria does your project fit with? So you just tick 1 and or 2 and or 3. So you can tick all 3 if you want. And then question 11, describe how the project will meet each of the criteria that you have selected. So if you've selected all 3, then I want 3 paragraphs. If you've only selected 1, then I only need 1 paragraph.
Can I just pop in at that point,
Yeah.
Hannah, just to say there is no extra merit for having all 3 criteria. We prefer to see one answered well and accurately, rather than just saying, oh, scattergun approach, we'll try all of them. They'll get some more points that way and we'll get more money. Not the case. Just go for the ones which accurately represent what you're trying to do in the project.
Thank you. So describe how the project will meet each of the criteria. So that's really the meat of the form. We need to know how what you're going to do is going to meet one of those criteria, or as many of the criteria as you've ticked. And then how will you evaluate the impact of this project? So even though this is a light touch form, we need to be able to monitor what we've done. We need to be able to say whether or not it was successful, say what we have achieved. Even if by the end of the process, we actually find out that it wasn't successful, and I'm doing that bunny ear quotation marks there, because actually we learn so much from things that don't go the way we thought they were going to go. But we do need to be able to evaluate, how are you going to evaluate the things that you did? I mean, we all know about evaluation, so there's some fancy words which are great with Scrabble. You've got quantitative and you've got qualitative. So quantitative is things you can count. This number of people came, this number of questions were asked, etc., etc. And qualitative is things that assess quality. So this is you might get a soundbite from somebody. Somebody might tell you how they thought of what they thought of the project or the quality of the thing. So just let us know how you're going to assess whether or not you've been successful. And then question 13, what is the total cost of the work? So again, you'll just notice there the word total. So you might say that this is going to cost £4,000, but you're only asking for 1,000 from us. But so what's the total cost of the project? And then how much would you like from Seeds for Growth? And that's it for level 1. It's very, very light touch. We've then got the data privacy notice. We've got a box you have to tick, and you've got a place you have to sign. So that's very, very light, and that's level 1. What then happens? You email this form into grants@churchofscotland.org.uk. If you're applying from a congregation, then you need to fill in the extract minute. We've given you a template to help you with that, just to say that, the Kirk Session are aware of this, that they are agreeing with this application, that this application should come forward from them. And then it needs to be accompanied by a letter of approval from an authorized presbytery official. It doesn't have to be a letter, it could be an email. If you're applying from a presbytery point of view, then we need an extract minute from an appropriate committee. It could be the business committee, it could be the mission committee, somebody like that. just pausing because sometimes David likes to jump in at this point, but he's not going to. So that is level 1. Going back to our guideline document, we've got here the assessment process that I have just described. And then there's a little checklist at the bottom of page 3. Applications should be focused on a defined project rather than a post, as we've discussed. Demonstrate a visionary approach to church growth, church planting, and pioneer mission. Set out the anticipated effect of the project. What's going to change? What are you trying to achieve? Include a clear plan. This is how we're going to do it. And then measurable targets. This is how we're going to measure whether or not we did it. Demonstrate a commitment to good collaboration or partnership working, including ecumenical partners, if that's part of what you're doing. And your application should tell us how the grant will meet the costs of the project. Carrying on, you already know that we aim to make the level 1 awards within 4 weeks of the date of application. I think I might have said 2 weeks earlier. David, is it 4 weeks or 2 weeks?
Which level? Level 1?
Level 1.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. But the money has to be spent within 12 months of receipt. If the application is unsuccessful, can we reapply? Yeah, basic feedback on the application will be given and a notification of the assessment letter. So as long as you're eligible, you can submit again a modification. And then reporting. So once the project is completed within 1 month of the completion, please write a single side of A4 report on how it went, what you learnt, and the impact that it had. You also need to report what the money was spent on. Individual receipts with a value of over £100 must be kept. And your accounts should be incorporated as restricted items into your annual accounts of your congregation or presbytery. So you'll see there that the question you filled in terms of how will you monitor this will be very, very helpful in filling in your one side of A4 of monitoring. So that is level 1 in all of its speedy glory. David, have you got any questions in your question box?
Yes, I'm just in the middle of trying to complete one for Asker Marzik. Proper apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. But it was around whether a person who is having half of their hours being paid by the project, the other half being voluntary hours, could be the named contact. I said, no, you can't be the named contact if you would benefit in any way from the project. You can be the person that fills the form in, if you're the person working on it, but the contacts have to be independent of you. So yes, it could be an elder, it could be someone else associated with the church who knows the work that's being done. But if you, as a person who's filled the form in, would benefit monetarily from the grant being paid, then the other two people, the people who are contacts, have to be those who are independent of you. So quick look at what else there was. Yeah, there's a question about whether first-time grants be considered level 3. So I'm saying that, yes, we have the initial proposal form so we can see what the project will be about. If we don't think you've reached level 3 maturity yet, we might refer you back for a level 2 or even level 1 grant. But we have the 2-stage process there, so we can take an initial look, and you don't waste filling in a level 3 form if we're not quite there yet, not quite ready for the application. That's it so far.
Okay, great. We've been on the call for 45 minutes. I'm just wondering whether this would be a comfort break time or whether we should plow on. I think probably we'll plow on for a little bit, and then David, if you can kind of vaguely wave at me in about half an hour's time to say that that might be time for a comfort break, that would be great. Okay, so level 2. As we've already discussed, level 2 gets a lot chunkier. You'll see that the guidelines went up from about 3 pages to about 11. But that's because we are giving you all the information for a perfect application. And we're also level 2 can be a small project. And so therefore, if it is a small project that you're applying to do, then you need all the information. Level 2, you might be using level 2 for a pilot, or you might be using it for a large one-off event, or you might be using it for training. In which case you don't need all this information. But in case you are following that pathway of starting a project that is going to continue on into level 3 and level 4, we're going to give you all the information. If you are filling in the level 2 form for training, for example, then some of these questions are going to be not particularly applicable, but that's fine. You'll figure that out as you go. So I'm going to start with the guidelines as before. We've already talked about what a level 2 is. It could be to test out the viability of an idea. It could be to undertake a piece of work that is going to put the foundations in place for a long-term project. It could be that it's something that an annual rhythm of funding is best for. Or it could be for training purposes. And therefore you might have identified through level 1, for example, what kind of training you need, and the volunteers or the staff members that would need the training to take this further, in which case level 2 might be the training pot for you. Who can apply? Same as before: churches, groups of churches, clusters, presbyteries, groups of presbyteries, ecumenical projects, as long as Church of Scotland is in the mix. How much can we apply for? So again, it's up to £10,000 and funding can run for 6 to 12 months. So please note that the particular phase of work for which you are making the application may last longer than 12 months. However, the funding needs to be spent within the 12 months. Also with level 2, if you're going to spend the money within 6 months, you can then apply for another one. That's absolutely fine as well, but we would need to have the reporting piece slotted in between those two. Can we apply and hold more than one grant? Yes, you can, as we've already talked about. And then can you have it alongside a small grant fund, Pioneer Mission Fund? Yes, you can. The criteria remain the same across all 4 levels. So we've got developing mission, developing and nurturing faith in the under 40s, fostering discipleship and revitalization within an established congregation with the aim of growing the existing congregation or developing a new worshipping community. And again, that piece there is underneath, that they will be prioritized through these 2 lenses: developing mission through new worshipping communities and church planting, and engaging in intergenerational work. So in the guidelines for level 2, we then now touch on that pioneer spectrum that we were talking about, because obviously if we've got this lens of new worshipping communities that we keep banging on about, anybody worth their salt's going to ask, well, what do you mean by the word new? What do you mean by the word worshipping? And what do you mean by the word community? Of which there are many, a thesis and book that you can buy into the theology of each and every one of those words. So I'm going to talk you through just now what we think we mean by those words. Okay, so the pioneer spectrum, you'll see there's a graphic there on page 3 if you're following along in the guidelines. It is what we just talked about that replicate, which is a church plant, taking an established model of church and maybe changing it a little bit, maybe a different time or a different place. But it's a church plant. And then we move along to adapt. So modifying ideas for use elsewhere, looking at the local context. So, for example, a well-known example of that would be Messy Church. Messy Church would be in the adapt category. And then we've got innovate. So that's really pushing the boundaries of what church is and seeking to find new ways to connect with people who do not currently go to church. We will fund any of those. None of those is better than the other. The pioneer spectrum is not from worst to good or good to worse. Whatever's right for your setting is absolutely fine. So what do we mean by the word new? Responding to the Spirit who creates anew, engaging with new people who do not engage with church, seeking to make and form new disciples of Christ, exploring and experimenting with new forms of church for a changing culture. So in your application, we need to know why you have decided what you have decided. Tell us if you've done a bit of research. Tell us about the conferences you've gone to, or the thoughts you've had, or the conversations you've had. Why is what you've chosen to do right for your context? It's not a trap. We just need to know that you've thought about it, that you haven't just plucked it out of thin air, that this has been some form of process of discerning what's right for your context. What do we mean by the word worship? So, discovering the Spirit sending to join God's mission for the transformation of the world, and gathering in contextually authentic ways to celebrate, encounter, witness to, and glorify God, and discerning the right time to do so. So, there's two very key words in there: contextually authentic. What does that mean? That means it's right for the people that you're interested in their community, in their locality. It's right for them. So you're going to need to spend some time with that group of people to be able to observe, to be able to learn, to be able to observe what is right for them. That's why a lot of these things that we sometimes call fresh expressions start with quite a long period of listening to the community that you're interested in reaching. Now, you're probably going to have been doing this. If you're at the stage where you're thinking about a project, if you're at the stage where you've done a level 1, then you've probably done this piece of work. But it's very important that we're aware that when we're thinking about new expressions of church, it's to reach the people that you're interested in reaching. It has to be real and right for them. And so there's probably going to be a period of listening. And then what do we mean by community? Cultivating restoration and belonging as signs of God's new creation, practicing mutual care, justice and responsibility, developing sustainability in leadership and finances. So that's what we mean by the words new worshipping community. But you might be sitting there thinking, well, I'm actually not going to tick level 1, criteria 1 of new worshipping community. I'm going to tick working with the people who are under 40, in which case we go on to talk about what do we mean by that. 1, it has at its heart an emphasis of enabling young people to grow in faith. That's what we're about. Will include spaces where young people are able to be with their peers. Will integrate with a wider number of groups where overt exploration of faith is not the key part or their purpose. I talked about that before. It's that understanding that a drop-in space leads to a youth club space, leads to a few people perhaps asking questions, leads to perhaps a Bible study, leads to perhaps a new worshipping community. We're aware that we have to fund all of those to get to that end point, but our direction of travel is still intentionally towards a new worshipping community that helps people grow in faith. It hopefully includes intergenerational spaces, which might be a connection with an existing congregation. We will support the formation of new worshipping communities aimed at young people. And as I said before, we are particularly interested, we are keen to see best practice. And what is best practice? When members of a project, when members of a community have accountability, have agency, are able to create change and lead from within. That's the same for young people as it is for any other member or part of our society.
Hannah, some people are saying they don't have the forms because they didn't receive them when they got the link and then come through another route. Is it possible you can share your screen to show where you are on the form so people can see the form as you go through?
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's just get the right one up. So this, I am talking about the guidelines, but I'm not saying anything more than, there's nothing more on the pieces of paper that I'm not saying, but this is what I'm working through at the moment. Can you see that, David? Is that up on the screen?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
there. Thank you.
So this is the guideline document that is sent out with the application form. We've worked through this bit. We've done the criteria. We've worked through, this is the graph I was telling you about what the Pioneer spectrum looks like. But you can literally just Google Pioneer spectrum and it will also come up. And we talked about what new was. We talked about what worship was. We talked about what community was. We talked about you working with young people. So that's where we are if you do have the document. And I was just about to say, you'll see here at the bottom of page 4, we will be very unlikely to fund work whose purpose appears to be the ongoing survival of an established faith community with whose life and worship young people are expected to fit in, and which does not evidence a commitment to overall change or shared leadership with young people. So that's important to note there. Okay, I'll continue to scroll through this document then, if that's a more helpful way of doing it. And what can and cannot be funded, we've talked about that. We've talked about the fact that, yes, you do not need to be match funded. But we do, as I've said, a theme of what we're looking at is financial sustainability. So you don't need match funding, but maybe some other funding would be a good idea. How do we apply? The same as before, you email us, we send you the application form. And as before, it's the same. We need a minute if you're a congregation, or we need somebody from presbytery to say, yes, I know about this. And then if you're a presbytery applying, then we need an authorized person such as a business convener or a clerk confirming that, yes, we support this application. Okay. Filling in the application form. Now, I am now going to swap over to the application form. So I wonder whether you would like me to show you the application form, which I can also do.
I think that's what people are after, yeah.
Okay, so this is the application form. Make it nice and big so that we don't have to all crane in and get closer to our computers. Okay, so part 1 is the same as before. Tell us about how you heard about Seeds for Growth, name of a congregation or presbytery. If you are a congregation, which presbyteries do you belong to? Enter the organisation's main address. Same as before with the primary contact and the secondary contact. They can't be related to each other or to anybody that would be benefiting from the funding in any way, so employed in any way. But as David said earlier, that's just the contact. The person who physically fills in the form can be anybody you like. So if the project works with a group of congregations or presbyteries, tell us who they are and what part they play. So obviously this is just for you to tell us that we're going to be working alongside this other denomination. We're going to be working alongside this youth group, etc., etc. What part are they going to play? Are you going to handle one part of the project? They're going to handle another? How's it going to work? And also here in 1.6, that's exactly the same with ecumenical partners. We don't mind. We love some ecumenical work. Yes, please. But just tell us what they're going to be doing, how you're going to be working together, and whether or not there is any particular ring fencing. They're going to do this and we're going to do that. We just need to know so that we understand your project. Part 2 about the project, name of project. Surprise us or be very dull. We don't mind. Please give an overall description of the work for which you are seeking funding, 350 words. So very similar to before. Please summarize your answer into about 50 words. That's just for us to be able to pithily tell people about your project. And if we use it in any form of kind of marketing, if we use it and when we share with people, these are these are things we have funded. That's the blurb that we will use. Tell us the story of what has brought you to this point. So obviously, the more we know about you, the more we understand you, understand your heart, understand how you've got to where you are. That's just better all round. So there has been, I'm sure, a journey for you to get to the point of applying for funding up to £10,000. So what is that journey? What conversations have you had? What have you tried out already? What have you done? Any form of research? Have you done any consultation? Have you tried something with another group? Have you watched somebody do something in another presbytery and thought, that's great, I'd like to replicate that? Whatever the journey is, that has brought you to this place, we would love to hear it. I've also find at this point that as well, often we have done more work than we think we have. You might think, oh, I've not done any consultation, I've not done any research, but actually you've been talking about this idea with people for some time. You talked to that local councillor when you met at the fete, and you talked to a couple of elders about it, and you went over to the food bank and you talked to some of their volunteers. So all of those things build the story of where you've got to, and why you think what you have. So, scratch your head, have a think back, and think about all the different places that you've had conversations. And remember that this might just be a one-off project, a one-off thing at £10,000. So it might be a small pilot. You might just want to do a piece of training. So just give us the background. Why do you want to do this training? What has shown you that you have a need for this training? Okay, then 2.4, describe who the project is aimed at and the reasons that you want to work with them. I want to just highlight here this last bit, the reasons you want to work with them, because people can have very, very different reasons to work with people, and that's absolutely fine. But they can go, don't let anything go unspoken in your thought process. Pop it down, because the more information we have, the better. So, for example, it might be the answer to this question, what is the reason? It might just be, I have a calling. I feel the Spirit move me. I'm discerning that God wants me to work in this area. That's a perfectly valid thing to say, and we would love to hear it. Or it could be that you say, well, actually, the group of people is, I don't know, let's say young parents. And you might say, the reason I want to work with young parents is because I personally have a work experience history of working with young parents. I know a lot about this area, and so I have a lot to give. And I really feel that I can make a difference in helping these people encounter God. Or the reason might be, I know there is a need here because I already interact with these people at our food bank. I already interact with young parents at our literacy project. I already interact with them through our counselling service. And I know that there is a piece missing here about God, about spiritual formation. So the reason to work with the group, they're quite different reasons. There might be about an intrinsic reason about you. It could be an external reason that you see a need and you want to reach it, or it could be a divine, or it could be a combination of them all. So I wanted to just highlight that we want to know why you want to work with these people. And then we have 2.5, our normal, select each of the criteria that you want to work with and describe how the project will meet each of the criteria you have selected. So same as before, if you've selected more than one criteria, then you need to answer that question for each of the criteria that you have selected. How long do you expect the phase of work that you are seeking funding for? Says there, level 2 grants must be spent within 12 months, but reapplications are possible after 6 months, which we've already said. Now, this is where it starts to get really, really meaty. 2.8, what do you hope your project will look like at the end of your funding period? In particular, how will it be different from your current situation? This is the change you want to see because of the work that you are doing. So this is where it really matters. This is where the rubber hit the road. Why are we doing this thing? And we're doing it because of a change that we want to see. And I'm going to flip now back to the guidelines. Let me just check that I'm on the right guidelines. I think I am. Can't see the title. So what do you hope your project will look like at the end of the funding period? Strong answers to this question will usually contain a change word. By that, we mean a word like increase, decrease, reduce, improve. They're all changes. They should describe the who, the what, and the how of change. For example, if we had an outcome that was new parents will feel more confident in praying, the who is the new parents. The feeling more confident in praying is the change, and the how, or the direction of change, is more. So by describing that change, you've given us the who, you've given us the what, and you've given us the direction of change. So that's the kind of thing that will help you fill in that question of what do you hope your project will look like at the end of the funding period. And you might find that there's quite a few changes that you can think of, so do have a really good think about what are all the changes that you hope your project might bring, could bring. Be hopeful. Think about all the ways in which you could affect change. And then we've got 2.9. What work will you do in order to see this change happen? So these are the actual activities that you're going to do. In funder speak, sometimes funders use the word outputs. So if your desired change was young people discover more of the relevance of Christian faith, one of the activities, one of the outputs you could do there is young people attend a course. So what will you do in order to see the change happen? Now, I think that actually there's going to be lots and lots of things that you can write down here, because so often we do many, many more things than we think we do. We're having open conversations, we're asking questions, we're looking at the Bible, we're on and on and on and on it goes. What is the work you will do in order to see this change happen? And then we've got 2.10, how will you evaluate the effectiveness of your work? So again, like we talked about very briefly with level 1, you need to think of indicators that you can look for and measure to aid tracking. So it could be indicators often have words around them like level of, or ability to, or number of. And these are things that you can measure. So they'd be quantitative, something you can count, or qualitative, assessing quality rather than quantity. So an example of a qualitative, that's just the word qualities in there, might be willingness to participate in time of prayer. And a quantitative measure might be the number of young people who participate in prayer. So these are the indicators. This is the way in which that you would judge whether or not you are being effective. I would suggest that from the very start of your project, you're keeping a note of these things, because these things crop up every single time, every meeting you have, every moment that you're spending with somebody, something like this will be happening. And if you've got a little notebook, or you've got a little, pop it up on your phone, notes, or ask everybody who works on the project to just keep a wee journal, a wee diary throughout the whole project, because then when it comes to evaluating at the end, that's a really easy process. You can say, oh my goodness, in week 2 we had 6, and by week 13 we had 25. And so it's really helpful to just keep a note of those things. Okay, so next we move on to 2.11. It just says, please give details of any paid posts which would be supported by this grant. So anybody that you might be paying that's part of this project, this is where you tell us about it. And we've already touched on the fact that an MDS role can't be topped up by Seeds for Growth. It needs to be a local contract specifically restricted to Seeds for Growth through your whoever your congregation or your presbytery, whoever's dealing with the project. Please tell us how you intend to recruit the right person for this post. If there is already a person in post, please give their name, starting date, and how they were assessed. So this is just as you would expect. We are expecting that these are publicly advertised, that an appointment is made on the basis of a transparent and fair recruitment. And if that hasn't happened, if you've already got somebody in place, then we need to know that you haven't done it in that way, and we need to know why, and we need to know that this person is the right person for the role. Just like any other situation where you're employing somebody, we would need to see the job description, the person specification, and the employment particular, just as any other project. Okay, I can swap back to the application form if you find it helpful, but the questions are here within the guidelines. So unless, David, you feel strongly you want to go back to look at the application form, I might just stay in the guidance notes.
I think the guidance notes are probably fine. Occasionally jump a question, but you'll notice that.
Okay. Okay, so how will a person in the role be supported and line managed? So again, we want to be places of best practice, and we know that projects grow and are successful when people are valued and supported, and therefore line managed well. So normal rules apply. Line managers should not be related to those that they are managing. And we need to make sure there's space for training, for learning, perhaps coaching and mentoring. And if those things are part of your project life time frame, then work that into your expenditure. If there's going to be a cost surrounded that, then put that into your expenditure. That's absolutely fine. We want to be good employers. Will you take part in the Seeds for Growth learning and training program? As we gain more and more people that we're funding, we're going to be starting to do learning communities. We're starting to do training projects and pieces like that, which we would love you to be part of. If we fund you, if you're not going to take part in those, that's absolutely fine. But if you could just tell us where you're going to be getting your learning and training from, then, which is there are other providers, that's absolutely fine. But we just need to make sure that our projects are being led by people who know what they're doing and people who are learning and growing as they go. Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll just take a wee break there, just for according to my clock, it's 2013. And just going to take 7 minutes till 2020. Just a cup of tea, comfort break, move your body about, and then we'll come back and we'll take it forward from there. Okay.
Thank you.
Hello all, welcome back. Welcome back. So we had got to halfway through the level 2 application form, which is part 3, presbytery. How does the project fit within your presbytery mission plan? In particular, is it named within your plan?
Can you share the screen again, Hannah, please?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
I can. Ta-da! It's quite a boring thing to share. It's just a white document with black writing. Part 3, presbytery. Does it fit in with your presbytery mission plan? We just need to know. That's all. Does it fit in with work that is happening locally, or is it unique within your context? Oh well, sorry, that's 3.2. We're aware of the fact that your presbytery it might not be at a stage in its life in terms of its presbytery plan where your project has been specifically named. That's absolutely fine. If you've had a conversation with somebody at presbytery, if you can just tell us about that. We just need to know that the presbytery has given support to your project. But if you're not named in the plan, that's okay. We just need to know whether or not you are. 3.2, how does your work fit with other work happening locally, or is it unique in your context? Obviously, I'm sure you can tell from that question that there's no right or wrong answer there, because both have pros and cons. Your project could be meeting a need and it be entirely unique. You've discovered a need and you can meet it, in which case absolutely hurrah and wonderful. Or you might be saying that actually you're highly networked, you're working alongside other providers, you're working alongside other organizations to meet a well-known need within your area, or a well-known aim, in which case that's okay too. And I'm sure some of you would be able to think of places where you can be both. So that's not a trap. We just need to know, as I said before, as much as we can know about you and your context and the context of your project, the better. So part 4, resourcing. Specifically, which areas of work would you use a Seeds for Growth grant for? And then for how many months will you use the grant? So again, we'd like you to use it, you spend the money within 12 months, but the project itself might keep going, but the money has to be spent within 12 months. So which areas of work would you use the Seeds of Growth grant for? I'm just going to check if there isn't anything particularly wonderful and interesting in the guidelines there with that bit before I show you the expenditure table.
One thing I would say, Hannah, at this point, we're interested in the full project costs, not just the bits you want us to put the money into. So if you're trying to do a £20,000 project, asking us for 10, we're still interested in the full £20,000 worth of expenditure, so we can understand the full scope of the project.
Indeed. What you'll see when you get sent the application form, you get sent the application form, you get sent the guidelines, you get sent an extract minute template, and you get sent this, which is let's see if I can make that bigger for you. It's just a list of all the places where you might spend money. So we'll come back to the income at the top, but the expenditure. So not your project might not use all of these things. It might not have all of these things as part of the project. They're here just as a kind of aid memoir, just in case if that is relevant to you. And obviously you get this document so you can add in as many lines as you like with anything that you need to put there. So these are the kinds of things that could come up as part of your project, and we need to know what the spend is going to be and what the allocation is going to be. You'll also notice that here it says additional information, and this is where you can put as much information as you like, break things down as much as you can so that we understand exactly where the money is going to go, or where you aim the money to go. And obviously it will going to go total up there. You'll also see as this is that there's an income space, because we might not be the only place in which you're getting resources. So amount requested from Seeds for Growth Fund, you put in there, but then you might be getting some money from the congregational funds, in which case put what you're aiming to get in there. You might be getting something from another charitable trust. We'd like you to put that in there. Specify. You might have dozens of them, in which case specify them and how much you're getting. You might be getting something from a public sector, like the local council or something like that. And then you might be doing the income generation idea that we talked about as well. And you might have think of things that we can't even think of right now because you're so imaginative and innovative. And so put them in there as well. And then that will also give us an idea of your sustainability, an idea of whether or not we're the only place you're getting money from, or what your plans are to make sure that you're financially sustainable going forward. So this is how you tell us how you're going to spend the money and what you're going to spend it on. And obviously at the top there, you just see that you put your project name there as well. So that's part of this application process at level 2. If you don't fill this in, we won't give you anything, like, obviously. But we will probably send you a little email saying, oh, notice you haven't filled in that table, just in case you've forgotten. But this is part of the application process at level 2. Is there anything you want to add on that, David, specifically?
No, that's great so far. Thank you.
Okay. So just have a look. I've said everything I need to say. So we've already covered in the intro PowerPoint about the various different ways in which you could get other finances into your project. Going down onto page 4 of the application form. And here is 4.3. How will you ensure your project is sustainable in the long term? So again, this might not be a question that's particularly relevant to you because, for example, if you're using the money for training purposes, then that doesn't really make sense. But if you are building a project that you're hoping is going to be long term into the future, or you're doing a small project within the £10,000, then we're going to need to know whether or not it's going to be sustainable. We've talked about whether or not that could be sponsoring congregations. It could be donations in from people who are taking part in the project. It could be income generation. It could be putting the price of your rent on your hall up and using the costs from the income from that. It could be any one of these things that we're talking about. It could be legacies. It could be there's many different ways that you can think about how your project might be sustainable in the long term. It's also important to note here that we're aware of the fact that certain projects are less likely to be able to really pull their weight in terms of income generation. So if you're sitting there in a priority area congregation, or you want to do a project into a place of economic deprivation, or you want to work with a set of people who really do not have a lot of disposable income, and we know that they don't have that, then that's okay. Don't think that this is therefore not applicable to you. We know that it is our responsibility as the Church of Scotland, as the national church, to make sure that we're planting fresh expressions and reaching all types of community. So please don't let that be a barrier to you sending in your application. We want to make sure that we're talking to you and finding ways forward together. So that's a really important thing for us to say at this point. Part 5 of the form, good practice. Explain how this particular project will be managed to ensure good practice throughout. So again, as just normal things. We need to understand, how is this project going to be supported and by whom? Are other organizations going to help? Who's going to be doing the day-to-day managing of day-to-day tasks? Who's going to be doing line managing? Who's in charge of kind of a monthly, pop-in chat to see how things are going? Are you going to use set people from your eldership who've got skills? Maybe you've got an accountant there, maybe you've got an HR manager there. Are they going to be helping? Who's managing the project? And how are you going to do it? You'll notice here that this is this is a how question. How are you going to do it? So it could be simple answers like, we will meet monthly. Maybe that's how you're going to ensure good practice. Or we're going to have minutes taken of our meeting, or we're going to create reports. We're going to ask the person we're employing. We're going to consult with our project users. We're going to ask other stakeholders. We're going to check in with other workers who are working alongside us. We're going to chat to our elder liaison. We have pastoral support in place, and this is how that's going to work. So basically just simple things that you would probably naturally do, but we just need to know that that's how this project is going to be managed. 5.2, again, safeguarding, as we looked at with level 1. We need to know that you are going to comply with the Church of Scotland safeguarding policies and practices, that you've read them, that you know about them, that you have your that there's a safeguarding training provided, that your safeguarding is that your register is up to date, and that your register has been submitted to the safeguarding service. If you're working alongside other organisations, then we need to know that they are also compliant with the Church of Scotland safeguarding policy. And then we end with our normal data privacy notices, which can be looked at clicking on those links. And then we have a space for signatures. And then we have our normal application checklist. All the questions have been answered correctly or have been answered. The income and expenditure spreadsheet is complete. If you're applying from a congregation, then we have the extract minute from the Kirk session and a letter of approval from an authorised presbytery person. Or if you're applying as a presbytery, that you have including an extract minute from the appropriate committee. Could be, sometimes they're named the business committee, sometimes they're named the mission committee, whatever the procedures are of your particular presbytery. If your project is going to employ somebody, then we need to see any applicable job descriptions, person specifications, and written statement of employment particulars. And then it all gets sent off to us. So what happens next? You send it in to us, and the grants unit will pass the details of the application to the the appropriate presbytery for confirmation. And then we will consider it at panel. Now, this panel happens monthly, so you're not having to wait till that 2nd of October deadline. One thing to note with us as a funder is that we have, in comparison to other funders, a very, very high rate of approval. Particularly that goes through the roof on the second time. So if you put something into us and it's not quite right, but your project has got legs, we're going to get in touch with you and say, this is great, but we need to think a little bit more about question 2.3. And we're going to help you through that process. We also have a wide range of people on our committee with particular specialisms that we can pair you up with, and say that person's going to give you a call or going to give you an online meeting and talk you through particular sticky patches if there's a bit that just needs a little bit of work. So don't be worried. I've talked you through a level 2 like it's a perfect application, but actually it can be much lighter than that. And we're going to work with you. We're friendly people and we want to give the money away. The best way to start the process is to get an application form in, because then obviously we've got your contact details, we've got your name, we can get in touch with you, you've pinged up on our radar, and we can help walk you through the process. All the form is showing us, it's like school, show us you're working. We want to know that you've thought about it. We want to know that you've thought the process through and that you're going in the right direction of travel. With levels 1 and 2, we're not necessarily expecting you to have a really firm idea of what your project is. This is still, or could still be, a pilot phase. This still could be part of your iterative process. Or, as I've said before, it could be a training piece. So don't be too worried if you're saying to us, I'm not sure where we're going yet. That's okay. That's what the pathway of funding is for. But we just need to see what you've thought through so far and what conclusions you've come to so far. As I said before, it doesn't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. You could go 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, back and forwards through this iterative process as we learn together about what's right for your context. We are very aware at Seeds for Growth that society today is a very constantly changing situation. We would rather get up and do and learn than be locked in a room where we're perfecting a plan and then the opportunity has passed us by. David, do we have any questions in the question and answer box?
I've been busy answering them as you've been going through, so nothing's currently outstanding.
Is there any other questions that you feel that it would be good for the rest of the room to hear?
There have been a couple. So one person asked whether we can give some examples of things that have been successful so far. While we will be publishing a list of projects which are being funded, I'm reticent to give examples. And the reason for that is that rather than thinking through your own local context and then praying through what the options might be and trying to discern what's true for your locality, I don't want you jumping on other people's ideas, because they may be good ideas, but they may not be right for your context. So please, 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 it may take a little smidgen more effort, but think about your own local context, do your own local research, work on what works for you, and try not to go down the easier route of just copying somebody else's idea. And then also someone's asked about
Can I jump in there
yeah,
actually just before
please.
you, because I just like to share there as well. Sometimes it can feel quite daunting to come up with ideas. It can feel quite daunting to use one's imagination. But there is a training piece that is available exactly for that, and it's called
And this
Culture.
fits with the second question, which
Oh,
is
sorry.
what's within our training program?
So there is for those of you I'm sure have heard that Church of Scotland has got an online learning portal. I'm not sure if that's the right word. Makes it sound like something out of Doctor Who, but it's called Church of Scotland Learning. And it's got lots and lots of free learning PowerPoints and videos that you can work through, training courses that you can do in your own context. And one of those is called Culture of Innovation. And if you go on the Church of Scotland Learning, then you'll find it there. It's 5 videos of me, and we work through different lectures on how to it's called future thinking, how to see the signals that are in your context, how to see the signals in your community. And then it works through lots of fun activities, brainstorming ideas, workshops, games about how to think, how to imagine, and how to come up with quick ideas that can be built on. So that's a free training piece that is there. Some people have put it all together into a massive block and done it over a day. Some people have done it as a conference when they've been pulling together a presbytery or pulling together a new cluster, because it's quite fun. It's a good culture changer. Some people have done one each week of home group. We've even had a couple of churches showing the little lecture snippets as the sermon as part of church on a Sunday. So there's lots and lots of different ways that you can use that. In terms of Church of Scotland Learning, I think the process is still, I mean, obviously go onto our website, look at Church of Scotland. I think the process is still you email saying, I'd like to register for this. It's free. And then our good colleague Lindsay emails you back and gets you onto that portal. So it's a free resource that can be used. Anything else, David?
So there's a question from Asker again saying something also needs the support of presbytery, which might be from an authorised presbytery official or a committee. What form does that need to be? Does it require a signature, a statement document, or whatever? I mean, we're happy to receive an email from an authorised person in presbytery, but they have to know they're authorised. And it could be a committee minute, in which case it would just be an extract minute from that committee, and that is a form which is normally provided as well, which could be a scanned document with a signature, or an extract, again with the signature when it comes to that level, because the more money that we're providing, then probably the more restrictive the documents you require to make that happen. So if it's a level 1, level 2, then an email from the authorised person, who could be the mission officer or somebody else, chairman of the business committee, whoever that presbytery thinks is authorised to allow level 1 and level 2 supportive applications. For level 3 and level 4, it's going to be an extract minute from one of the committees, perhaps business committee or mission committee, again, as selected by the presbytery. Or level 4, it would have to be a full extract minute from a full presbytery meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? No.
Nope, think we're okay for now.
Great. Okay. So let's push on. It's 20 to 9. I think we should be able to finish by 9. So because what we're going to do next is we're going to look at levels 3 and 4. And as I said previously, level 3 and level 4, it starts with a process which is called the initial proposal form. From this point on, I'm going to try and say IPF. But that always makes me think of pints, but I think that might be IPA, but I'm going to try and say IPF. So what happens is you email us, we send you out the IPF, and then you fill it in. And then basically what happens is we read it and we think, oh, great, sounds great. Here's the application form. Get it in by the 2nd of October. Or if it's level 4, we say, okay, we also need to have a conversation with a committee member, and here's the full application form. Get it in by the 2nd of October. As I say, leave some space for that to happen. So what I will do is I will try and get the form on the screen for you lovely people. And I will click the share button. And that should be working. Kind of a nod. Brilliant. Thanks, Lynn. So as before, we have at the top of the page, we have just what I've just explained about level 3 grants up to £40,000 a year for 3 years, both, and then can be extended by 2 more years. And for level 4, it's the same, but up to £100,000 a year. 2-stage process for the level 3, 4, and for level 4, a 3-stage process. And we've just highlighted there. We want to be getting IPFs in July, really, for the 2nd of October deadline for you to be able to turn around the full level 3 application form. We will be putting the full level 3 application form and the guidelines up onto our website. That's my next job after I've spoken to you lovely people, is to rework our web pages. And we'll also be putting up there a film of just what I've done this evening, but specifically for level 3. You will see a jump up in what we're asking for in the full application form for level 3. As we described, we're really looking at chunky pieces of money now, £40,000 a year. So that is to be expected. But the IPF is quite light because, again, we're just trying to figure out whether or not your project is appropriate at level 3. Or perhaps we might go back to you and say, I think this sounds like a level 2, actually, or whatever. So same old questions as before. What is the name of your congregation or presbytery? If there's a charity number, then that's where it goes. What is the presbytery that you're part of? If you're a congregation, our main contact as before. Please don't put it as somebody that is going to benefit from the funding directly by employment. About the project, briefly describe your project, 350 words. Now, another key thing about funding applications is people can be a bit sneaky and kind of amalgamate lots of mini questions into one question. And we've done that here. As the person that's applying, try and answer specifically every single part of that. So you will see here that it says include something of your story to this point, who you want to engage with, the difference or differences, I would say, that you hope your initiative will make, and then how this fits in with your presbytery mission plan. So there's kind of 4 subsections there. So we would be looking for you to touch, even if it's just a sentence, we would be looking for you to touch on each of those, please. Then we've got our normal, which criteria do you believe your project meets? And we have our normal applications for the following will be prioritized through these 2 lenses. And then describe how the project will meet each of the criteria you have selected above. As before, 3 paragraphs if you've clicked all 3. Now, this is where it gets a little bit different from what we've done previously. We've got here individual changes. So just as we talked about at level 2, what are the changes you would like to see through this work? Yeah, so what are you trying to achieve? What's going to be different after this work than is currently the case? And then within these changes, we want you to cover that who and what and how that we talked about in the guidelines for level 2. Who will these involve? And when might that happen? So we're adding in there a bit of a timeline now as well. What length of time are you expecting before you start to see this change? List them below. Complete as many changes as required, but we suggest 3 to 5 in total is adequate. And then we would expect to see your key changes relate to the criteria in question 6. Now that might seem a bit obvious, but we've said it anyway. So we need to know that your work is moving towards these criteria, is fitting these criteria. And so therefore, obviously, the changes that you want to see, the difference your project is going to make is going to connect in with those criteria that you've ticked. Yeah, hopefully that would make sense to you. So again, you can use those level 2 guidelines to talk about who is the change about, what is the change you're going to see, and the direction of the change. And then we've also added in this extra bit about what kind of timeline are you thinking of before you're going to see changes. And then question 9, outline what do you intend to do that will make the above listed changes happen. So here, this is probably going to be the chunkiest bit of the form. This is probably going to be quite long, obviously, depending on how many changes that you've chosen to write down. But we would like you to outline the work, the activities, the things you're going to do that make that change happen. Now, there'll be overlap. Some of the activities and tasks that you do will contribute to several of the changes, but it would probably be clearer for you to do a paragraph about change 1, a paragraph about change 2, a paragraph about change 3. I would suggest that would be the natural way in which that would make sense. What are you actually going to do to create change, that specific change? And we want to be able to see that connection between the criteria, the change, the activity. Question 10, tell us about who is involved in the project so far and who else you hope to involve. So that's a place for you to tell us about your context, isn't it? The people you might be working with, the people you are already working with, the people who helped you at level 2 if you did a pilot, the people that helped you from level 1 if you did a level 1 piece of work. It might be about the organizations that you're partnering with, or if you're working in a community that's networked, you might be saying, well, we're also working with Women's Aid and we're also connecting in with the primary school, whatever. Who are the people that are involved in the project so far, and who else would you hope to involve? Now, that includes the people that what we would call the end users of the project, but it might also be, as I said, parallel people, peers, and organizations that you're working with. And don't forget, your church and your church network. Don't forget your elders. Don't forget your other denominations down the road. Don't forget interfaith relationships. Don't forget the presbytery, who can be very, very helpful to you in this, and us. So there's lots of different people that you would be working with. Question 11, I'm moving on to, have you ever had any funding at any point in the history of this project from Seeds for Growth, Go For It, Parish Development Fund, Priority Areas Staffing Fund, or Emerging Ministries Fund? Please give details. We just need to know what is the background of your project, what is the history of your project. David, do you want to say anything more specifically about why we want to know that?
It's just so we can see if there's been continuity from one thing to another. So we don't mind that you've received funding from any of those. That's fine. It's just trying to make sure that we appreciate where the money's going, what it's doing, and what support it's providing for part of the process.
Then question 12, how much money might you need? So again, that's for the whole project. So again, remembering what we said about the fact that you might be getting funding from other places, or you might be getting congregational input, or etc., etc. But how much money might you need in total? Question 13, what money do you already have? And what other potential sources of funding will you be trying? And how do you hope to ensure your project becomes financially self-sustaining? So you'll see here, this is another place where we've been a bit sneaky, and we've added in 3 questions really into that one question. So we're asking you, what money do you already have? We're asking you, what potential sources of funding will you be trying? And we're asking you to just outline for us how you're going to hope to become self-sustaining. This is obviously just the initial project proposal form, IPF. So we're looking for broad brush strokes here, but this is what will be giving us a clue about whether or not you've thought through about sustainability. We are now up to, the IPF is obviously for levels 3 and 4. So we're up to chunky pieces of money, and it is really, really strong in our hearts that we do not want to create projects that die the moment our funding stops. So we want to be able, so we would be expecting you to be thinking about things like maybe front loading the amount of money you get across your 3 to 5 years, tapering off as the other streams of income generation and the other types of funding come alongside to help us until you get to a place where hopefully you're self-sustaining within the project. That's our heart. We want to see long-term growth for the Church of Scotland, and we want to reach this 51% of the population who currently state that they have no faith. So that's question 13. That's a really chunky one. We need to know what your plan is for when the Seeds for Growth money runs out. It's a weaning off process, and we need to start that process right from the beginning. We need to put into the culture right from the beginning that this is a culture of giving. We need to put right in from the very beginning that financial discipleship is part of 360-degree discipleship, and we need to be seeing that you are moving in that general direction of travel. And then question 14 is, what will your main items of expenditure be? So at this level of form, we're not asking you to itemize, but if you know that there are going to be really chunky pieces, like, for example, you might say, we're going to be employing somebody as part of the project, and that's going to be this level, then that would be just helpful for us to know right from the beginning. And then we close with our normal data privacy notice, and we have a place here for signing and confirmation, same as before. Person signing should not be someone whose role will be funded, and it also can't be somebody who is related to that. And then you send it back to the wonderful Lynn Hood at grants@churchofscotland.org.uk. We'll read it. We'll have a conversation with you about what's next. It might be just, yes, green light, here's the full application form. Or it might be, we need to talk about a little bit more about this, or can you give me a bit more understanding about that? And if it's a level 3, we'll also be connecting you in with a committee member to have a much fuller. If it's level 4, sorry, I might have said the wrong number there. If it's a level 4, we'll be connecting you in with a committee member to have a really long conversation about the piece. So I'm going to ask David if there are any more questions. We have come to the end of the content for this evening. We're going to do a poll in a moment just to gather, I think it's just 3 questions, so really quickly. But we will also be emailing you out. Do remember that if the email that was sent to Lynn is wrong, or you're a different person that emailed previously, then give us a better email address. We'll be sending out the slides, and we will also probably be sending out a just very, very brief evaluation form as well. Email us at any time. Say, I want to join the learning community. Could you put on an event which is much more discursive now that we've got the information? Do be in contact with us. The next thing that you hopefully should be seeing is we're going to update the web pages, put all of the documents that were emailed out to you on the web, and there will also be a film like tonight, but working through the level 3 application form. David, do we have any questions?
So we've had some questions coming in again during that session. We expect to have 2 grant rounds a year for level 3 and level 4 funding, with application deadlines probably in March and in October. The date for this next round is the 2nd of October. That's when the full form has to be back, the initial proposal form sometime before that, to give you then time to complete the full form by the 2nd of October. That means the committee can then sort of even out the work across the year. Level 1 and level 2 can be, as I've made, done at any time, and there's no restrictions as to when those applications are made. We do try and take a bit of a holiday in July and December, but apart from that, we respond pretty quickly. That's our intention. I can see people starting to fill in the response forms, which is great. Thank you very much. Yeah, looking for a bit of feedback as to what you're after for future training sessions as well, which is great for us to help with a bit of planning for the future. We want to be responsive to what your needs are, and this really helps us in that process. It's been really good to have you on the call tonight. If there are any other questions, please do put them in the section. Let's have a look what someone said. How would funding from CFF be viewed in light of recent changes to criteria? I don't know what CFF is, Ross. If you can type in another question that tells me that would be helpful. And Asker, you're saying, could you decide before that date? So Asker asked whether we could possibly fund something that will start mid-September. If we were responsive to every application, then our workload would increase quite a lot. So we have to have it within the dates and timeframes that we've specified. So I'm afraid that we couldn't do a level 3 application out of the blue. For someone, it has to go fit within the structure and timeframe that we do. Otherwise, we can't regulate the work that the committee has to do, or the staff either. So I'm afraid that wouldn't be possible, Asker.
But perhaps a reimagining at a level 2 might be.
Yeah, so if you want to kickstart something, that's fine. But any applications, if you're going to start a piece of work before you make an application, that's at your own risk. We can't guarantee we'll fund things. We'd like to, but we can't guarantee it. And also, we can't provide funding for work that's happened before the date of offering a grant. So if you started a project and you apply perhaps 3 months later, and then we say no for that round and you apply again in 6 months, maybe 12 months down the line before we may be offered a grant. We couldn't fund the work that's happened in that previous 12 months, only the work from the date at which you offer the grant. And that's at your own risk.
So Ross has come back and told us that CFF is Consolidated Fabric Fund. And then he's put, now no longer restricted to fabric. I've added the intonation, but that is how I feel Ross would say that.
Okay. I don't see any conflict, Ross, between CFF funding and funding from Seeds for Growth. They're independent funding sources. You could show CFF as being one of the funding sources for a project, and that would just be good to see, knowing that you're providing some of the funding that's come from your own fabric in the past. So just include it as part of the application process. We'll consider it, but I don't see there being a conflict.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Just pop them in the Q&A box.
We'll also be doing this this again on the 2nd, I believe it's Monday, the 2nd of September, I believe. So if you enjoyed it terribly and you'd like to come and hear it all again, then you can come back then. Or if perhaps you've got somebody that you're thinking, oh gosh, I really wish our treasurer had heard this or something like that, then point them in the direction of Monday, the 2nd of September. And we will, we might make some films very similar to this that we put up on the website. We'll definitely be doing one for the level 3 application, but we'll also make a decision whether or not the level 1 and the level 2 would be helpful as well.
So yes, any questions, we're happy to field them at any time. Do email into the grants at churchofscotland.org.uk email address. The training program is there. We'll be there shortly to also support ideas for projects and applications, perhaps some ideas about where to get grant funding from. We've run one of those already from Faith and Community Scotland, doing that for us in Glasgow. We've got the roadshows coming up across the country in different presbyteries. Normally we organise that with the presbytery individually rather than publicise that across the patch. But we're here we want to give you the money. We want to support projects that will restart the growth within the Church of Scotland. And we're looking forward to seeing how these things develop. We're really looking forward to engaging with you as well. If you do get the project going and we're funding it, we're pulling you together to share with each other what's working, what's not working as well, because you can learn from that as part of the process. But really looking forward to getting some sense of excitement and movement in the church towards growth.
And remember to email us at grants@churchofscotland.org.uk. If you want that list of 60 funders as well, we can email that out to you as well. And remember about the Benefact Trust and is it Churches Trust? Is that what it's called?
The National Churches Trust.
National Churches Trust for capital expenditure. So thank you very, very much, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry that that's been 2 hours, but we just wanted to make sure that we gave you as much information as possible. And again, be in contact with us. I'm just Sanderson at churchofscotland.org.uk, and David is just D. Williams. So do reach out if you'd like a further conversation. Thank you so much,
Thank you and
and
good
good
night.
night.